Hey guys, today I'm going to talk about the books that I read this month. This is the second time I filmed this video because it was super out of focus and it still might be out of focus. F, man. Okay, hopefully this is in focus. So today I'm going to talk about the books that I read this month, and it's kind of more so books I read in the past month and a half. This started in November but also kind of up to today. So it's like a month and a half of books, and I only read 5, but that's better than 0, which is what I have been reading. I read a lot of young adult fiction and middle grade fiction. No middle grade this month though. This is all cute little young adult fiction books. Everybody who is new, thanks for being here. That's pretty neat. I'm really surprised that my BoxyCharm video got that many views because I was pretty negative in that video. And it's a long video too. I never do videos that long. Apparently people liked them, so that's cool. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you enjoy this one too. Lots of pressure, it's fine. The first book that I'm going to talk about, these are all ebooks by the way, either from Amazon with Kindle or with Hoopla that's connected to your library card. So either way, I think all of these were free. I didn't pay for any of these books, which is great. I know my library has, I think 3 different apps that they're connected to where you can get a bunch of ebooks for free. So check out your local library. If you like reading ebooks, if you like reading regular books, go to your library and get some regular books. Either way, go to your library. It's great. And the first book is Just for Clicks by Kara McDowell, and none of these authors I've ever heard of before this month, so these are all brand new for me. This is about twins named Poppy and Claire. Their mom runs a really popular blog that they are basically starring in. It's about them. And they also have a YouTube channel, and Poppy loves it. She is all about being rich and famous, but Claire really just wants to be a normal kid. And this book is told in Claire's perspective. She meets a new boy who was doing Good Samaritan work with his dad in India or something. So he's new, he doesn't have a cell phone, and he doesn't really keep up to date with stuff. So she's like, well, awesome. So he has no idea who I am, so I'm just gonna tell him I'm just some normal kid. The blog is doing really well. It's a fashion blog, so they get a lot of free clothes and they get to do all kinds of fun things. They get some really tempting offers. Her sister is all for it. And of course Claire is I'm gonna have to think about it. I enjoyed all of these books this month, so none of them I hated or anything. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was really good. It was poetic kind of, which is something I really don't tend to like in my young adult books. I'd rather my books sound like it's actually being narrated by a 16-year-old, and I don't know, the way they do the wind howled, it's a kid's not gonna talk like that. So I kind of wish it wasn't so poetic and so English major, but it was still a really good book. The next book I read was 10 Blind Dates by Ashley Elston, and this was a nice little holiday read. This is set in Christmas, New Year's time, and Sophie and her boyfriend break up right at Christmas break, and she goes and hangs out with her family and it's this giant Italian family, and they're all crammed together. I think they're all neighbors, so they all are constantly at their grandmother's house. Everyone finds out that Sophie is newly single, and they all put her on blind dates with guys that they know, and they're like, oh, this is gonna be great. This is gonna be a great way for you to just get over him, feel better. You don't have to commit to anything, but you could still date a little and, get yourself out there and just not think about him the whole time. So she goes on 10 different blind dates in 2 weeks, and her sister's pregnant and she can't be there with her. She originally was going to go there and see her sister, but she decided not to. She didn't want to deal with the drama, I guess. That's also something on her mind, but she's having a lot of fun with all these blind dates, and she falls in love, but I'm not going to tell you who she falls in love with, but it is very precious, and I love little Christmas stories like that. It was fun. The next book is the first book I read by Brianna Shrum, and I actually have 3 books by her to talk about, and this is called Kissing Ezra, Holtz, and Other Things I Did for Science. Amalia and Ezra are both Jewish teenagers, and they go to the same synagogue. They don't like each other. They really try to avoid each other whenever possible. He's like super full of himself and really smart and whatever, and she is laid back and doesn't really tend to care about anything. So they're pretty opposite, and they just try to avoid each other. They had to do a project in psychology together, and they decided to do one on like falling in love, and they brought together 2 different couples, and we get to hear their love stories, but also you know, her and Ezra have a little bit of a love story too. So I feel like this is one of the more probable books. Like, I feel like this could actually happen in real life. It makes sense. You're doing a psychology project about falling in love. It makes sense to fall in love with the person you're working with, especially when you know them already. Even if you don't like them, you still know them and you're doing this project together and whatever. So it makes sense that it would happen. I prefer books that would most likely, like, could actually happen. I really don't like books where you read it and you're like, there's no way that would ever happen. I really don't love those books. I like them to be more realistic. And this was one of the more realistic ones, and I really liked this one. And the next book is The Art of French Kissing. And this one was my favorite book that I read this month. I thought it was really well done and super adorable. This is about Carter, and she gets the opportunity to go on a cooking competition, and the person who wins actually gets like full scholarship to a really awesome like culinary school, and she would love to do that. Cooking is her life, so she's super excited to get to go, and she's up against a bunch of other teenagers that are also, you know, competing for the same thing. They do the first competition, and this boy named Reed like screws her over. She didn't do anything, she doesn't know him, and he like sabotages her basically, and she's like, what? I don't even know you. And he's like, well, I want to win, and I don't care who I have to screw over basically to win. And so they form like a enemy thing, and they just basically focus on trying to mess the other person up and make them go home. And then they have to become partners to actually cook together, and they're like yelling at each other the whole time, and they don't get along, and it's just a bad time. And then like the next day she can't sleep, she goes downstairs and sees him, and he's like an insomniac. He can't sleep in the middle of the night, so he goes downstairs and there's a fire burning, and he reads, and it's quiet and beautiful down there. So she goes down there and they end up talking, and it's the middle of the night and he doesn't seem so evil. You have cocoa and there's a fireplace, and oh, he's so great actually. And then like the next day it's like, oh no, you still suck. But they still have to work together, so they try to get along and everything. This was such a good book. I really liked this one. And the final book I'm going to talk about is How to Make Out. Renly is a super giant like math nerd, and her best friend are trying to save up to go to New York and see a bunch of these weird math museums. And she decides that a good way to save up for it would be to start a blog, and she does the first one. It's like how to do trigonometry, and then how to do a braid, and how to do a cat eye and stuff like that. And then the blog starts becoming popular. She starts getting a little bit of money in, and her best friend is her next door neighbor, and he's like in love with her, but she doesn't feel the same way about him. She gets a question of how to make out, and she's like, well, we just gonna have to go on and see, huh? She goes next door, and they're like, well, I need to answer this question, so come here. So she's working really hard on the blog, and people ask her questions, and she does whatever they ask, and she does like her highlights and the bikini wax and all this. She is in a cooking class, and the person who sits next to her in cooking is really bad at math, and she's like, well, I can help you with that. So she helps him with math, and he teaches her how to cook. And he has a girlfriend, but they break up. It's like no big deal, and they start dating. Carter, she changes a lot. She has a full face of makeup on. She changes her clothes. She like goes out and parties and everything, like nothing like what she used to be. Basically just because the blog is telling her to, and she's just doing it. She kind of has to choose between the boys. She doesn't know what to do, and it's really good. It's a really good book. I liked all of these books. I suggest all of them. I think they're all really good. Brianna, Shrum, they are young adult fiction, but some of them have a little bit of more like suggestive adult themes. Not much, but just a little bit, but something to keep in mind. I was reading these at work, and I'm really glad I was the only person in the break room, because there were a couple times where I was like, what? So I'm very glad I was there by myself, because I was just like gasping at my little phone, like, she said what? I had a great time reading this month. I really missed it, and I didn't even realize it. It was really nice to get back to reading. And the next book that I'm going to read is Murder Funding, which is the second book to Murder Trending, which came out last year, and it was amazing. And I'm really excited to read this one. And I think I'm going to do like an end of the year books I read this year type video. So you'll see some more books. Hopefully I'll finish a couple more books by the end of the year, and you'll see those in there too. I'm excited to see how many books I read this year. I know I read a lot. I'm gonna go ahead and guess 80. I'm gonna guess I read 80 books this year, which I think is pretty cool. I used to read all the time, like constantly reading, so it's not like it's a lot, but for me this year I feel like I did a really good job of reading and just enjoying things, and I had a good time. I've read a lot of really good books, especially this month. I loved all of these books. I thought they were all really good, and especially since they were from authors I've never heard of, I loved them so much, because sometimes it can be a little hard to find books that you love. Sometimes they're good, they're okay, but sometimes they're just okay. So I like that these books I loved. I definitely suggest all of these books. I got them from Amazon and Hoopla, so they were all free for me. Hoopla is connected to your library account, so hopefully your library is connected with Hoopla and you can get some books for free, because I love it. And if not, you can always go to your library and get some physical books for free. That's a great thing about reading, is that you don't have to spend money on it. It's free if you go to the library. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you want it, and I'll see you in my next video.